It's joint practice day, joint practice number 2. Arizona Cardinals coming in. What are the Broncos needing to get out of that? What does Bo Nix need to get out of that? What does the defense need to get out of that? What more do the Broncos have to get out of this day after what they got out of last week? We're going to talk about that on Denver Football After Dark. Here we go into the night. You know, there's something that says, like with the algorithm, apparently it's better if you get to the topic of the show right off the bat. So that's why you see my face first now, before the slide there. So you see my face, and then you see me talking about the show, and then we get to it. Denver Football After Dark on this Wednesday morning, Thursday, or Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Goodness gracious, Gertrude. Here, as the Broncos have another one of their key days here in training camp. It's actually the last official day of training camp as far as what they're marketing it as, because it's the last public practice, although for all intents and purposes, training camp goes on for another week. But next week's practices are going to be with people still watching in the bleachers, but corporate sponsors, basically. So the crowd is a little bit different. Instead of fans being able to get tickets through Ticketmaster and whatnot, it's people from Empower and Ford and whatnot. So it's a little different crowd. Common Spirit, you know the sponsors. Howdy. Here. In the middle of the night. Not really. It's not the middle of the night yet. It's just the night. So, as we begin this, we're just several hours, maybe more than several, away from the Arizona Cardinals and the Denver Broncos kicking things off. And after what we saw last week against the San Francisco 49ers, some promising things, some things to work on. On the offensive field, some promising things with Bo Nix getting to the second act, beyond structure, doing some things off platform, some of his best plays, but the fact that he was having to operate beyond structure because he was under duress. Nick Bosa in particular causing some problems. That was a concern. The running game, we saw R.J. Harvey kicking things outside, especially in the game. Well, one thing to talk about, at least from Wednesday, which was, it was a prep day of practice. I really don't want to make too much of what went on practice-wise. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say, hey, Bo Nix to Cortland Sutton, they were making that combination work. I mean, they were really, there was only a limited amount of team period work in this practice, and it was very much about laying the groundwork for what was going to happen Thursday, kind of setting things up. But if you want to kind of say, okay, what groundwork are you laying? Okay, it's getting the Nix to Sutton combination percolating, you hope. Also, getting things percolating in terms of getting the run going up the middle, because we saw some nice cutback runs between the numbers, between the hash marks by both R.J. Harvey and J.K. Dobbins. There was one particularly nice run where Adam Troutman got a pretty good seal on Jonathan Cooper, which is notable because Coop, we know how terrific he is at setting the edge. Running in his direction has been extremely difficult for the first team offense. So Trout gets a nice block, and again, kind of reminding you of something that Trout does very well. And Dobbins makes a nice cut, goes through the hole. And of course, RJ Harvey adjusting, adapting, growing. A couple of plays later, sees the crease, cuts, does the one cut and go like Bobby Turner would have told him to do, and then right up the gut, nice run. So, okay, you're hoping to see that Thursday against another team when the contact and the intensity takes it up a notch, in the parlance of the Mandelbaums from Seinfeld way back in the day. So that's what you're hoping for here. So that's, if you were getting anything out of Wednesday's practice, that's kind of what you were taking. That these things, in terms of getting on rhythm, that, all right, let's see them happen on Thursday. And then, of course, on the defensive field for the Broncos from last week, they got off to a great start. That was something we talked about. If you had cut the practice off at about, say 11:25 or so Pacific time, or 11:30 or so Pacific time last week, if you just walked away, you would have said, man, the Broncos defense just completely destroyed the 49ers, dominated. They owned the day. But the practice did not end then. So to say the Broncos defense dominated the entire day would have been a falsehood. And I think I shared that with y'all accordingly, that the Niners did do plenty of things positive for them, did get momentum, did drive down the field a few times, did get some touchdowns in the red zone period, did have a play being Jahdae Barron, did do some positive things despite some tight coverage from the Broncos, did get a touchdown when Riley Moss he plastered and held as long as he could, but Brock Purdy had all day to throw, there wasn't any pressure on him on that last play, and even the best corners can only hold coverage but for so long. Touchdown to Demarcus Robinson, that ended the drive. So what you're hoping for the D is that they can finish stronger than they did last time with a different challenge. I mean, you've got a different type of quarterback, certainly more of a second act type of quarterback here in Kyler Murray than Brock Purdy, someone who's probably at his best beyond structure. Another tight end who can cause you problems, George Kittle, someone who's more on the backside of his career, but still one of the very best. And now you have a tight end who is just becoming somebody who can dominate you, just signed a big contract. And of course, that's a name who's very familiar to all of us around here. And that's Trey McBride, former star at Colorado State. I think those of you who were, following me a few years ago through the pre-draft process, I talked a lot about Trey McBride leading into that draft. One of my, every year I've got a few prospects that I sort of say are my guys that I really take a liking to, and Trey McBride was one of my guys in the 2023 draft process, and it's been really cool to see him succeed down in Arizona, and or 2022 draft process, I'm sorry. Really cool to see him succeed. Not a surprise, but man, I'll tell you this, though, on the Broncos. You look back at the 2022 draft at the end of that second round, two guys that they were kind of honed in on as the second round pack went toward the end. Two guys they were honed in on were Trey McBride and Nick Bonito, and McBride went off the board, but then they got Bonito. So you talk about, again, kind of George Payton and his staff sort of knowing kind of what they're doing and what they're looking for. I mean, that's, McBride would have looked awfully good in orange and blue, but the Broncos were at the point where, because of the Russell Wilson trade, they were starting to be limited on draft capital. Getting Nick Bonito worked out pretty nicely for them. Did not practice on Wednesday, still dealing with a foot issue. So you imagine they'll probably be cautious with Nick Bonito going forward. I don't know if Nick Bonito needs to prove much of anything, given what we've seen from him already. If he's got even a slightest tweak, I think you wrap him in bubble wrap and get him ready for the regular season. So, Denver football after dark here on this Thursday morning leading into joint practice. So, on the defensive side, let's actually hear from Vance Joseph, who did speak after practice and what he is looking to get out of this joint practice. It's basically pretty simple. Here's VJ talking about that.
I want improvement. I'm doing some things in practice I won't do it in games that I'm testing for the season. I want our guys to obviously, play at a high standard. I want finish. I want great coverage. I want great rush. I want good football. And that's, this team coming in tomorrow. I mean, they ran the ball well last year and this week against Kansas City. So again, it's going to be a great test for our front and our back end guys covering. It's a quarterback who can run. So testing our rush lanes is going to be good against Kyler. So it's the next test, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think first of all, improvement. I think that's obvious, but the fact that he's testing things, I think that's something to remember here for what the Broncos are doing and what they end up working on. And it's a reminder for, I think, for all of us as we watch the Broncos and what they're doing, to always sort of take a step back and understand that while you're evaluating these players, especially younger players, to see how they're progressing, that similar to how this YouTube channel, I refer to this as a test kitchen, which is why I sort of even have like a different introduction than I did last week. This is the time of year that you're sort of treating it as a test kitchen. You're trying things out. And that's why I say we talk about things day to day and the events of the day to day, because we're chronicling what's going on with the Broncos. So we talk about the things that go on day to day in the practices, but always, always, always keep them in the proper context of the greater path toward the season. So I know it's tempting to kind of get really high or really low, but just always kind of try to avoid that if you can, because sometimes if they're doing something that maybe they get caught with their pants down a little bit on a play, sometimes it's a look, it's a blitz, it's something exotic, or maybe it's it's a style. If you're talking about the offense, I mean they're trying more wide zone this year on the offensive line. Sometimes in training camp, and sometimes you're fiddling with things to see if you can expand the menu, seeing what works, what doesn't. I mean, when you try wide zone, for example, some players are going to handle that better than others. You could say, for example, when you go wide zone on offense, it's probably going to suit someone like Garrett Bowles better than it might suit, say, Ben Powers. Garrett Bowles is someone who's, obviously got some athletic traits. He's got speed. He's got some speed. He's got foot. He's got some good feet. We know about his athletic background. He played lacrosse back in the day. We know what it looks like when he's hustling downfield for that second or third block on a long run. That's something that's always been a strength of his. Ben Powers is, the type of guy who's going to mix it up inside and be more of a mauler. That's his game. Now, Ben Powers, before everyone kind of jumps and says, hey, he struggled last week. Yeah, he did struggle in the limited sample size last week. And, maybe in camp, I mean, last Thursday, yeah, we saw him get beat in a rep in the 49ers, and the joint practice wasn't his best day. We also have to kind of step back and say, okay, the season that he just completed last year, he ranked top 5 in the league in both pass block win rate and run block win rate among interior offensive linemen. So we have to see, okay, that's the most recent large sample size that we have to work with. Let's see what happens going forward as we get into the season before we sort of say, okay, we've got a real huge problem here. Because again, they're trying new things. They're trying more wide zone. And we know that Zach Strief likes to use off-season training camp to try new things, whether it's schematic or even have his players have the freedom to try new things as well tactically. That's something he encourages his guys to do. So perspective is something that we all kind of try to have. So anyway, Denver football after dark. Love that you do this for Night Owls, Mace. Hey, and as a fellow night owl, I enjoy doing this. And even though it's always close to my bedtime, honestly, my brain kind of works best at this hour for whatever reason. Sometimes I wish it didn't, but it just does. I have a lot of my best thoughts here in the wee small hours of the morning, the beginning of the middle of the night, as it were. Broncos fan for life. Hope to hear that Kyler and the Cardinals defense is struggling. Still don't believe how Denver missed him. Yeah, Kyler Murray. Yep. It's hard to believe this is his 7th season, man. I've been using the phrase "it happens fast" a lot, talking about like life in general. I mean, seems like yesterday we were talking about Kyler Murray, whether he was going to go play football or go play for the A's, and here we are heading into year 7 with Kyler. McBride is special. Yeah, Trey McBride's really special. Yeah, it's real special. Good dude. One of those guys where if you don't have a rooting interest in the game and you're watching him, you root for him as a person. And certainly everyone who gives a darn about the CSU Rams, I think still roots for him as well. Caden asking, you think Shadé will start week 1? Who's he taking snaps from? If not, when does he get the start? I expect, if I were making a prediction right now, I think week 1, it's going to be status quo among the cornerbacks. I think you'll still see Jaquan McMillan as your slot corner. I think you'll see Jahdae Barron as your dime back. I think they'll find some packages for him. They'll find ways to get him out there maybe more than you would expect a typical dime back. And I think they'll find ways to include him as a chess piece type. I think they'll try to use him in some creative packages, some creative rushes. But what we have seen is even though we saw Jaquan get beat deep last week, and so I know that's sort of on everybody's mind when Jaquan got beat by the 49ers on that first possession. We've also seen Jaquan make some plays too. Like we saw, Jaquan today, again, or on Wednesday, don't want to make too much of Wednesday's practice because of the tempo is that, but we've seen Jaquan McMillan have some picks. He had a pick on Tuesday. He had, for example, so it's there. It's been there. Jaquan, like I said, interception on Tuesday. He actually got beat for a touchdown on Wednesday there in the 2-point conversion drill. Courtlandson had to play against him. So I think we'll see Jaquan, who's had a pretty solid camp on the whole. I think we'll see Jaquan McMillan still be the slot corner when all is said and done at the start of the year. I mean, put it this way. Vance Joseph's talking about Jahdae Barron learning from mistakes, which is good that he's adapting from things that are going wrong, but at the same time, it means that he's still making those mistakes. Now, they're growing points for him, and he's taking them in the right way, but I think it's probable that you're looking at Barron being somebody who I think you just sort of ease him into more work. Maybe by the middle of the season, you're talking about him playing more extensively. But I think right now, maybe you just have sort of some packages for him, and you work him in bit by bit by bit. And because you can't expect all of your top three corners to stay healthy the entire year, it's one of those positions at which there's usually some natural attrition. Just look last year, for example, and eventually you lost Riley Moss for a while, as we know. So it's going to happen at some point, and you'll have to find out about life without Surtain or Moss or McMillan, and then you'd see Barron go in there. I mean, also I would say, hey, Chris Abrams-Drain has had a heck of a camp as well. So the Broncos have some nice depth at corner. This isn't, with all due respect to Levi Wallace, this is not a position where if you have an injury or two, you're not going to be caught short. I think you're pretty good right now, depth-wise, 1 to 5, and you see a couple of those guys there, of course, Jaquan McMillan and Jahdae Barron. So I feel pretty good about things right now at that position. So, yeah, optimism. I don't want to be, blowing sunshine up everybody's rear end. Going to keep it real here, but if you err on any side, especially with younger players growing, and we know players do have the capacity to grow, they don't stay the same. Because, hey, I mean, what were we talking, think of all the comments and all the things that were out there about Troy Franklin a year ago, and now think of where he is now. Okay? I mean, players develop, players grow, players make progress. Nobody stays the same. One of the really fun aspects of covering this sport is seeing how guys grow from year to year. It's sports in general. I mean, as a baseball guy, I love tracking guys coming up through the minor leagues. I mean, I was looking in on Ethan Holiday making his debut on Tuesday night for the Fresno Grizzlies in the California League in the Rockies system. I mean, that's pretty awesome, right? I mean, to be able to track these guys all the way up. I mean, that's fun. That's pretty awesome. Got his first 2-hit game on Wednesday night. As I just went and looked it up because I didn't have time to check him out on Wednesday night, but I'll probably just check it right now. So there it is. So hey, it's exciting. So, or he got his 2-hit game on Tuesday. So yeah, the highlights went up on Wednesday. So this is all part of it. So intense day all around, sounded like a Dan Reeves day. Yeah. Hope we don't destroy a rookie in week 1 and get lazy and get destroyed in the weeks after that. Of course, talking about Cam Ward, I'm old school. If I were the Titans, I would not start Cam Ward in week 1. I've actually put it out there. The history of number 1 overall picks at quarterback in week 1 as rookies in the common draft era, so 1967 onward, it's incredibly poor. Teams that start rookie quarterbacks who were top picks in week 1 in the common draft era, they've only won once, and that was the Broncos, and that was 1983 with John Elway, and he got benched. So the one team that won in that scenario didn't even play the quarterback to the completion of the game. They had to go bring in Steve DeBerg, the all-time relief picture of quarterbacks, to come in and save the day for the Broncos in Pittsburgh. Yeah. Now, when Will Levis was knocked out for the season, that became much less viable. And, of course, our old friend Trevor Siemian, T-Money Sizzle, has now signed with the Tennessee Titans. But realistically, him coming in now and learning the system still, I don't think it's viable. Cam Ward, barring injury, is going to start week 1. But it's still, in an ideal situation, if I were Brian Callahan, I wouldn't do it. So, but I'm kind of old school. I remember last year heading into training camp, I predicted that Bo Nix would not start until week 4. I did not like the idea of Bo Nix having his first start at Seattle. I was hoping for a little more benign environment for him to make his debut. If he had to start on the road, I thought the Meadowlands was a little bit better of a place than Seattle and Lumen Field and dealing with the 12s and all the noise because that place is a cauldron. But hey, you had to deal with it sometime. And certainly to Bo Nix's credit, it did not faze him. I think certainly he had the mental framework to handle it well. Not everybody could have handled that. He could. But like I said, I'm sort of old school. I'm not. I would have waited a little bit. But at the same time, he was the best quarterback the Broncos had. So there's that too. Like it would have been interesting if you had not started Bo Nix because you ultimately do have to go with what the meritocracy reveals and what you try to have things be a meritocracy in the NFL. It isn't always that way, as we know, but you should always aim for a meritocracy. And he was the best quarterback last year. He was better than Jarrett Stidham. He was better than Zach Wilson. So it's what they had to do. And it worked out okay. Rest in peace to Lionel Taylor. Yes, Ring of Famer Lionel Taylor. His death was announced on Wednesday. He died on August 6th, age of 89. And what a football life that Lionel Taylor had. Of course, came to the Broncos early in the 1960 season, a couple of games in. And he set standards that lasted decades after he retired. So his receiving touchdown record for the Broncos wasn't surpassed. It was matched by Haven Moses in 1981, but it wasn't surpassed until 2002 by Rod Smith and then Channing Sharp shortly thereafter. His receiving yardage and receptions records weren't surpassed in Broncos history until 1999. So when you have these standards that do not get broken until 30 plus years after, I mean, that says an awful lot about what kind of player you were, that you raised the bar so much that it's 3 decades, especially as a pass receiver, that you raise the bar by that much that it takes generations for your records to be broken. He led the AFL in receiving 5 times. I mean, really, he actually did get some discussion in the seniors committee last year. And seeing as how they've honored AFL greats and gotten them into the Hall of Fame, it would be nice to actually see his candidacy get some momentum and discussion, because we've seen some AFL players actually, as you've revisited their Hall of Fame lineage, we've seen them get some momentum. And so, unfortunately, it won't happen while he's with us, but he actually does have a very interesting case. And of course, an original Ring of Famer, the first Ring of Fame class was 1984 when Pat Bowlen became the owner. It was one of the first things he did was establish the Ring of Fame, and he also established the standards of saying, hey, you had to be a Bronco for at least 4 years, and you had to be at least 4 years out, 4 years retired, and Lionel Taylor was a very easy choice as part of the charter class of the Ring of Fame, and had a terrific football life. He went into coaching not long after and joined Chuck Noll's staff in Pittsburgh in 1970, earned 2 Super Bowl rings with the Steelers, coached wide receivers, and of course that meant he coached Lynn Swann and he coached John Stallworth, 2 Hall of Famers. And then he went on to the Los Angeles Rams, eventually became their offensive coordinator, was on their staff when they went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Steelers. Eventually was the head coach at Texas Southern University. Got back into the NFL, was on the Cleveland Browns staff when they went to the AFC Championship and they lost to Cleveland. The third time in that 3 times in 4 years when the Browns went with Bernie Kosar at quarterback. Taylor was on the staff for that third time as receivers coach. He was also pass game coordinator there. And then wound up his coaching career in Europe. He actually was in the World League / NFL Europe. He was the final coach of the London / England Monarchs as a head coach there from 96 through 98. So a very fascinating football life led by the late Lionel Taylor, who actually came back to Denver last year. He had not been to Denver in a while, but he came back last year as part of the alumni weekend and viewed his Ring of Fame pillar for the first time. Really kind of a cool moment to actually see his pillar on Ring of Fame Plaza, and really seeing as how he passed on. And really, really wonderful that he got to actually see his Ring of Fame pillar in person there before he passed on. So yeah, it's a sad day to say goodbye to the great Lionel Taylor, but one who will always be remembered. Really, we don't have very few players left from those early 1960s Broncos, sadly. Gene Mingo in the Ring of Fame, he's still with us, of course. But yeah, very few of those legends are still with us, unfortunately. Arvada Orange mentions, first 100-catch season, was Lionel Taylor as well. And you've seen, I don't know if many of you, if all of you have seen the clips. I mean, there's not a lot of film out there, but there are some, and I think you can probably find some of the old Bronco highlight films from the early 60s. I believe they are floating out there on YouTube. I'm actually going to check right now. I believe the Broncos did go and post some of them at some point. Let me find this. See, I'm typing it in right now. This is always great video when I'm sitting here typing it. Yep. Let's see. Some of them are. I don't know if the Broncos still have. Yep. Broncos history, 1960 yearbook, 1962 yearbook. Yep, but they're all there. Just so you type Broncos history, 1961 yearbook, 1962 yearbook, 1963 yearbook. It's there. You can find it on YouTube and just dive in and check out Lionel Taylor highlights. It's, in black and white, and you can bask in the greatness of the original number 87 for the Broncos. So check that. That's worth checking out, I think. Worth your time. So, wasn't born yet when Lionel Taylor. Yeah, neither was I. Neither were a lot. I'd say probably most of us who are here in this room right now in this conversation were not alive when Taylor was alive. How do you keep this random knowledge in your head? Have a random person says a comment, if 5 minutes worth of facts talk about it. I don't know. I can't. It's just there. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I just looked it up sometime. I guess to answer a question, something like that, I remember when I was 10 years old and we took our vacation to the beach, and we were living in Richmond, Virginia at the time, and we took our vacation down to Southern Shores, North Carolina, which was in the Outer Banks, and we were staying at this cottage. And I would always have books I was reading in the summer checked out from the library. And that year, one of the big books I was reading, it was this huge, it was like about 300 some odd page book, and it was just football and at that moment. And I had a couple other books as well. I was actually very into reading books on countries. Like, and weirdly, I was into books like about countries behind the Iron Curtain because I wondered like what life was like, you know, in countries that were completely different. So like I'd read like a book about the Soviet Union or Poland or Czechoslovakia at the time. Of course, now it's, Czechia and Slovakia and so forth. But one of the books I had was this thing like on NFL legends, and it was this huge book. And I remember taking it to the beach and just like sometimes I'd be sitting when I wasn't in the water, just on a boogie board or whatever, and I'd just be sitting there and just reading, just inhaling it basically. So, and I remember I think that was also a summer when my parents at some point during a preseason, we would get the Washington preseason games on television, and at some point they had on an ad on television for like the team 50th anniversary yearbook, and they ordered that for me, and of course I just devoured it. I would devour anything, like any book that came in, and I would just read it and like, commit to memory. I mean, we had a like a University of Virginia men's basketball media, like a yearbook media guide floating around that we'd gotten from a basketball game a few years earlier, and I can basically, there are parts of that I still have like committed to memory almost, because I must have read that like 10 or 15 times and so forth. Like that's just, I don't know why. Like these things just stick with me. So anyway, how long have I covered the Broncos? Okay, my first year was '02. Covered them through '07, and then I covered the Panthers for a couple of years, '08, '09, and then I've been on the beat since 2010 completely. So basically, all but 2 of the last 24 seasons. Why has Bo Nix struggled at camp? I think part of it is he's going up against a pretty tough defense. I think part of it is they're expanding the menu for him. He's just adapting to some different things being thrown at him. I think part of it is he's growing as a young quarterback. I think that it's inevitable that there are going to be some ups and downs. I think part of it is that progress for a young quarterback, it's not necessarily a straight line. It's not a straight incline. There's some back and forth. There's some ups and downs. It's not always perfect. There are eggs broken en route to making an omelet. I think it's not always going to be, wow, it's awesome. Sometimes it's going to be, okay, you wish you had that throwback. It's going to be, okay, maybe you got to put a little bit more on that. It's learning from mistakes. I mean, there's some great throws. There are some touchdowns. I mean, think back to the quasi scrimmage. Okay, he hits Troy Franklin. That should have been a touchdown. It's dropped. And then you go fast forward a week later against San Francisco, and he tries to find Troy Franklin, and there's just not enough on the ball. Okay, well then that's more on Nix, right? And then sometimes there's miscommunications as well. I mean, there's some plays you see. Okay, maybe it's on Bo, maybe it's also on the receiver. Things happen. There's like a lot of moving parts as well. So I'd say it's just, in general, it's just growing pains of an offense that not just has a young quarterback, but it's got a bunch of young receivers. It's got a new tight end that you're bringing in, Evan Ingram, that's trying to figure things out. It's got it's 2 new running backs, J.K. Dobbins, a veteran, and R.J. Harvey, a rookie. So I don't think we can expect everything to be perfect immediately. I think you're excited about the possibilities of these skill players and what they bring dynamically, but maybe we just need to say, okay, it's not going to be everything immediately. I think we can be excited about what it might be in October, November, but maybe expect things to be bulky at times early. Just remember last year what things looked like early and then how they looked later in the season. It takes some time. And even though Bo Nix is not a rookie anymore, there's going to be some growth and there's going to be some adjustment to new things being thrown in this year. So, But as Sean Payton says, it's a race to get better. So anyway, when will you be worried about Knicks? If he has a poor practice tomorrow, you know what? Ask me after 4 games. That's when I'll be worried. If it's like that after 4 games, it is a much bigger picture for me than that. Yep, and 0-2. So I'm not worried right now. I've got to see a lot more before I say, oh boy. I mean, last year, when he started 0-2, and when they started 0-2, and he didn't have a touchdown until week 4. Just said, okay, let's just trust the sample size here. Honestly, I think it's wise to do the old John Fox thing and break it into quarters and say, okay, where is it at each quarter? Okay. And maybe we do the same thing here. Let's step back and see, okay, where are things after 1 quarter of the season? And then proceed from there. So problem is, that's not the environment in which we exist right now, especially the speed at which everything goes, the speed at which people react. I certainly don't work at a workplace where patience in terms of reacting to things is a virtue. Over on the radio side of things, they're probably, if there's a bad first game, they're going to be screaming about it. So probably throwing them under the bus a little bit, but I'm just running my race, doing my thing. So big year for Kyler in his career. Yeah. Like I said, it happens fast. Year 7. It's it's another fork in the road for him, and not the when you come to a fork in the road, take it thing for Yogi Berra. He's expensive, chewing up a lot of their cap, and they've got to start to wonder about the investment, if it's worth it, if it's money well spent. It's also a key year for that franchise as a whole, because the 49ers, I think they're a better team than last year's fade would indicate. If they get a little bit better health, then they'll be an interesting team, a feisty team. But the Cardinals are still one of those teams that if things come together for them, that's a team that could be a playoff team. They have reason to believe that they could win 10 or 11 games and be in the mix. And I think that it's a fair expectation and goal for them. And they ought to be disappointed if they're not. So, and if they're not, they probably have to do some reevaluation. I think now similar to the Colts, but they're in a different spot, because at least the Cardinals have a dynamic quarterback. The Colts have a pretty good roster in a lot of spots, but the quarterback, either it's a guy with a lot of potential who has no accuracy whatsoever and can't stay healthy in Anthony Richardson, or a quarterback who talent-wise may be just a guy in Daniel Jones, but despite that, does have a playoff win, remarkably, under his belt, and may actually be somebody who could find at least functionality now that he's out of the Giants vortex. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway. Ooh, good question, Michael. Caleb Lohner, quiet camp. Early in camp, he made a couple of plays that jumped out, but hasn't really flashed lately. I think it's just very raw for him. And what we're seeing now is sort of the product of, in the phraseology of John Elway, drinking from the fire hose. it probably is going to be easier maybe for the Broncos to sneak him through to the practice squad. So if it remains quiet for him, I think we may see the Broncos waive him and try to get him to the practice squad. That it's starting to look, I think, more likely that's what the Broncos will try to do. We haven't seen much from him in the last couple of weeks. I think it's also telling that we look back, like most of his best plays, especially like at the end of minicamp, came before pads went on. He's got a long way to go. So, and the other thing I will say, long way to go. I'm sure they want to see how he develops over the course of the season on the practice field. I do wonder if after the season he's developed enough to where they feel confident in him long term, or they say, well, it'd be nice to see where he goes, but do we go fishing for a tight end in next year's draft? I mean, I've seen a couple of those too early mock drafts that came out immediately after the draft and the weeks afterward had the Broncos mocked to Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon, and he would make a lot of sense, especially with Ingram being on a 2-year contract. And skill set wise, I think he'd fit exceptionally well. And for all the Broncos got out of last year's draft, as intriguing as Lohner's skill set is, if you can polish him and be patient with him, I still think the one thing that they ended up missing out of this last draft class was, in a deep tight end year, was not getting one of those tight ends. Even going into day 2, in terms of Arroyo or Farmer, for example, who I think could have probably stepped in and been pretty helpful pretty quickly. So that was sort of the one thing that was missing out of that. And Lohner's intriguing to develop, but you watch him out there and you're reminded of why, okay, it's going to be some time for him, and how you got to be patient, and he's just a long, long way off. I mean, in terms of being a tight end who could step in and give you a few snaps, Caden Prescorn, who has a lot more college experience, Caden Prescorn's ahead of him right now. Caden Prescorn, I think, sticks on the practice squad. And if you needed somebody to step in and give you some snaps, Prescorn could do it. I'm not sure Lohner could do it right now. But it's understandable. I mean, the guy, you can count his college snaps in double digits. You really couldn't realistically expect much of a positive contribution from him this year. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So, wouldn't have asked that. Prescorn hadn't caught that touchdown pass. So, yeah, that's fair. In 35 years, I've never been this excited for the team. Brent, that's saying something, considering this team had Peyton Manning for 4 of those years, and within the last 35 years had some guy named John Elway. I mean, this team had some pretty great quarterbacks and players and teams and possibilities. So saying you've never been this excited, wow, that's a spicy meatball. I'd be sad if we finish 7-10, but if that excitement lasts the whole season, it'll make me more excited for next season. Hey, I like that. So if they finish 7-10, it carries over. I dig that, because I think for a lot of people around here, if this team finished 7-10, I don't think that excitement would carry over. I think there'd be some resentment. So that's just my feeling of taking the temperature of people around here, and how people react to season. So I know I mentioned Titans quarterback with Cy Ward. Yep, it's our good friend. Like I said, Team Money Sizzle. Arvada Orange, you're welcome for the show. and I appreciate you and everybody watching this and appreciating this. This is just kind of brain dumping for me and kind of getting stuff off my chest, and also, as I often say, putting in reps because I need to get better at doing an individual show, at being able to talk without a co-host, because that was something at which I struggled. I didn't want to, it was sort of like I'm dating myself here. It was sort of like Wayne's World when Wayne gets fired after insulting Noah Vanderhoff of Noah's Arcade, and then Garth is left in the studio and he's like, I'm having a good time. Not. And he like freezes and it's like dead air, and yeah, that's what I was afraid it was going to be. Not. I can actually talk now. It's wild. So, who knew? Who knew? Getting a very early start for breakfast. Yeah, I guess I should just go and go over to the kitchen and make my eggs. Get them ready. Well, hey, Detroit Mission Control. Glad you could drop by, get some sleep, get ready for Broncos joint practice on Thursday. But I appreciate having you here. So, Eric, hey, appreciate you, Eric. Appreciate you checking in live. Appreciate you coming in. Bronco fan for life. It'll feel like 2022 letdown if they only win 7. Yeah, it will. Sean Payton's never won fewer than 7 games. So that's why no matter what, even if all the bleep hits the fan, and it's why last year I thought they would not win fewer than 7 games. And in fact, I remember Sean Payton being quoted as saying that he would, the next time I win fewer than 7 bleeping games will be the first. Like, I could not see, even with everything last year, that they would not win fewer than 7. I thought despite everything, 7-10 was their floor. And they end up winning 10. But I thought they would find a way, no matter what, last year to win 7 games. And so that helped. And that was one thing with Sean Payton coming in. The moment he came in, this team's floor elevated. And there's something to be said for a coach like that you bring in somebody of that ilk and instantly raising the floor. I think no matter what happens, I would be shocked if the Broncos ever had a truly bad season with Sean Payton. Stunned. It would, if it happened, it would be like at the very, very end, sort of like Bill Belichick in New England. I never thought a Bill Belichick team would be capable of a season like the one they had at the end, but it turned out he was. And I guess we should have known because Bill Belichick's first season was bad way back in Cleveland back in 1991. But I think there were other factors involved too. But generally I can't see a Sean Payton team ever winning fewer than 7 games. He would find a way. Of course, I also thought a John Fox team at one point would never win fewer than 7 games, and then his 2010 Panthers went 2-14. So who knows? Floating in a back to tank here. Heal up. I'm about to float in a back to tank here in about 10 minutes and go to sleep because I gotta get my 7 hours. I usually get up at about 8:15 or so Mountain Time, and so I'm going to do that. But appreciate you here. It was my mom who actually reminded me my show went a little long last night. She texted me about that, and I'm guessing if she's not watching now, she'll watch it in the morning. So, real question from Eric the Blue. Most important improvement to see from the Cardinals joint practice and preseason game. I want to see better pass protection for Bo Nix, and I want to see if the defense gets off to a good start. I don't want to see the let up in the back half. So I want to see sustaining on that field and Then on the offense, I want to see Bo Nix better protected. And I also want, the other thing I want to see to kind of carry over what I saw kind of previewing from Wednesday, looking at it Thursday, I want to see those cutback runs between the hash marks and between the numbers. I want to see cutback runs, not outside, but inside. Quickest path between 2 points, the straight line up the middle. That's what I want to see. So, Caden points out it sucks to hear the ball went on the ground with Watson. I think he could be stood up with the right opportunity. Speed similar to Jaleel break tackles with receiving ability. Yeah, two of those 2 plays back to back. One was on Watson. One was on Ellinger. As I kind of saw it, and there were myself and there were a few of us kind of standing together watching practice. At that point, I think it was myself, Luca Evans of Denver Post, Cody Roark of Mile High, and Henry Chisholm of DNVR, and we all kind of agreed together. I think Troy Rank of the Denver Post was there too. We all basically agreed that like one of those was on Watson and one of those was on Ellinger. We all kind of, sometimes especially when like today it was on a far field, so I've got my binoculars out trying to make sure I can see everything, and I've got these huge binoculars so I can see far away, and we all sort of sometimes as we're watching, we all kind of we check, we kind of compare, especially when our angles aren't great. We sort of compare to make sure we all kind of saw the same thing. Just to make sure that we all kind of caught it together. So everyone's, just so we're all accurate. So, we reporters, we do kind of work together. So what does this team remind you of the most in 2025? I'll predict Shanahan's 05 team. Fell short, full of talent. And the late Larry Coyer, yeah, killer defensive coordinator, man. Larry was at his best that year. You'd see him after practice. He'd sit on the bench, had his pipe, smoke his pipe. He knew he had something special with that unit that year. Old school defensive coordinator, and he'd been around a lot of defenses, so it meant basically he had all sorts of tactics kind of at his mental disposal that he could kind of borrow from. And he was and Mike Shanahan didn't realize it, and he probably didn't appreciate Larry Coyer enough. But Larry was the ideal defensive coordinator because Mike would say, okay, this went wrong, Larry, I need you to fix this. And he'd be like, okay, Mike, and he would do it year after year. Whatever Mike had realized had to be fixed, Larry would find a way to fix it in the offseason. Because he'd been around so much over the years, he always could borrow something from one of his stops over the years. Like he'd been in the USFL, he'd been at all sorts of colleges, all sorts of schemes. Like there was so much he could draw from. And anyway, I think the 05 team actually makes some sense. Right down to maybe Bo kind of working efficiently. Court kind of filling the role of Rod Smith. And you're hoping that one of the young receivers sort of fills the role of Ashley Lee. Now you hope one of the young receivers then long-term takes the next step that Ashley couldn't. Yeah, that was a good team. That was the other thing about that 05 team was that 05 team had extraordinary chemistry, and I think this team has great chemistry too. That's another thing I like about this. So, Bo greater than Plummer. Well, as our old friend Gary Kubiak would say, we're fixing to find out. Larry Coyer's a downfall because of Joe Ellis. I don't think Joe had anything to do with that. There was nothing about that. I think with Larry Coyer, because that was 06, and they had a great D at the start of the year, and then things fell apart in the back half of the season. And I think the other thing that happened, of course, you had the death of Darren Williams there. on New Year's Day of '07, and I think in the week or two after that, and of course Larry was dismissed right after that. I don't think everybody was kind of. I don't think everybody's mind was right after that, understandably so. Of course, but I think, unfortunately, I think Larry getting dismissed then was sort of a unfortunate consequence of part of the fallout of Darren being killed. I think again, I think everyone was affected, and I think there were some decisions like that were made that were made emotionally and hastily that probably should not have been made, and I think that was one of them. And unfortunately, Jim Bates, they brought in as a defensive coordinator. Very nice guy, was just the wrong guy tactically at the wrong guy at the wrong time. And I think, Harry, you nail it here. Everyone was broken. Javon was not the same. That team wasn't the same. And everyone was broken, and then not even 2 months later, we're burying another player when Damian Nash died. And it was like it was a broken team. It was a heartbroken team, and it was a broken team. And that team won 7 games, and it was fortunate to win that many games. They won, what was it, the Buffalo game, the Pittsburgh game, the Minnesota game, and the Raiders game. They won 4 games on walk-off kicks by Jason Elam. That's how close that team was to being 3-13. So like that 07 team was, and 2 of those were overtime. The Raiders game, and the Raiders game was where we were introduced to Mike Shanahan calling the timeout at the last possible second when Janikowski was going to kick, and of course they kicked it. He kicked it, it was good, but he called the timeout. And so we were introduced to that tactic that now is everywhere. But yeah, two of those were in overtime that they won. And that's how close the Broncos were. And the Buffalo game was getting the field goal team on at the last second before time ran out. The call was in the lexicon of the playbook at the time, the call was Toro, Toro, Toro. And that was that team was really close to having a very, very bad record. And the defense was headed downhill. And then a year later, the defense was even worse. But Jay Cutler got better, and Brandon Marshall got better. And so the offense was incredibly explosive, and that team was nearly a playoff team despite having oodles of injuries at running back, and was 8-5, and then the roof caved in, and they finished 8-8, and Mike Shanahan got fired, and that was sort of another. I mean, again, sort of. You also can basically say that Darren Williams' death was probably the beginning of the end of the Mike Shanahan era as well. Like that was it. So, Michael Davis, can you ask Sean Payton, why do you wear away colors during the first home game of the season? Can't imagine watching the Broncos at home wearing whites again. 2 losses. Mahalo. That is an interesting question. I may not ask him at a press conference. I'm just going to try to get to the bottom of that at some point. Why wear white at home? Because they've done it now the last 2 years. And yes, for those first home games, they are 0-2. NFL coaches are an extraordinarily superstitious lot. And the Broncos, white at home for regular season games, of course. They did it. Washington in 23 and they lost. Pittsburgh in 24 and they lost. The last time they did it before then was '03 against the Chargers when they had to, because the NFL made them because they brought the wrong jerseys to San Diego earlier that season, and the punishment was Chargers got jersey choice for the return game in November. And the last time before that was they wore white by choice, per Dan Reeves, for a couple of games early in the '83 season. I believe off the top of my head, those games were Philadelphia and the Raiders, and I believe the Broncos lost those games. And they also wore white early in the '80 season. I believe they did it for the, correct me if I'm wrong, they did it for the Cowboy game, and I believe they did it for the Charger game as well. They lost to the Chargers and they beat the Cowboys. Now, I may be missing a game as well in there, a game or two as well in there. So I'm not exactly right. I could go, I can go look it up. The data's out there, but I'm trying to recall. Sorry, I'm trying to recall off the top of my head here when they wore white at home. So you're going to have to bear with me if I don't get it exactly right, but I'm in the ballpark. I'll admit it doesn't bother me as much as it bothers other people. I know it's a Bronco tradition, but I also am like, it's the day, it's the daytime, it's September. Most early to mid-September Sundays, it's hot. You make a team wear their dark jersey standing on the opposite sideline. They're in the sun. Like a team like Pittsburgh, the black jerseys attack. The sun hits it. It gets hot. I do get it, and it does. Does it create an advantage? That's debatable, but it hasn't helped. But I'll say it doesn't bother. I know it bothers other people. It bothers Bronco fans. I get it, but it doesn't bother me. I actually don't mind seeing and I'll be honest, I don't mind seeing the white jerseys at home because it's a change up. But that's me. But I didn't grow up around here, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask. And I'll say this: I'm the wrong person to ask because my first exposure to the NFL, being born in Virginia, raised in Richmond until I was 11, my first exposure to the NFL was Washington in the 1980s when they wore white at home for every game. So to me, white at home mentally makes sense. So I think that probably has something to do with my way of thinking. I'm like, white at home, that's fine. And then I moved to Tampa when I was 11, and starting in '89, the Bucks began wearing white at home for at least some games every year. They have worn white at home for at least part of their schedule every season since 1989. So this will be the 37th consecutive season they've done that. So to me, my brain, white at home is normal. But around here, it's not. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask. So anyway, but I would be like, but what I want to see, if it's up to me, I want to see, and I know they lost in the uniform with orange pants. I want to see white jerseys, orange pants, white socks. I want to see that. That's a sharp look. I hope they don't wear white pants with the white socks. Please don't do that. They did that last week. It looks so boring. The white jerseys, white pants, white socks. It just looks so boring. There's no where's the color? Where's the flash? You need orange. You need blue. Your colors are orange and blue. Orange and blue. Don't give me the white pants with the white socks. Don't give me the unitard look. Yuck. Anyway, sorry. But white jerseys are fine if you jazz it up with some blue or some orange. Okay? Anyway. Anyway. I don't know why. Again, I don't know why I remember this. I don't know. I don't know why I can tell you that. I mean, look, I don't know why I can tell you that on an October Sunday in 1986, Washington beat St. Louis 28-21. I don't know why I can tell you that. I don't know why I can tell you that. Well, actually, I know why I can tell you that North Carolina beat Georgia Tech in overtime in Atlanta in early February 1986 because I just watched that game on YouTube. But YouTube, by the way, YouTube is just this fountain of old games right now, and I'm just like, it's delightful for me. Like my YouTube algorithm is nothing but like old sporting events from like the 80s. It's fantastic. It's beautiful. Give us the striped socks. Bring back the striped socks. I actually have somewhere on my computer before the Broncos actually did their uniform change. I have a mock-up of a proposed uniform that actually had like I created like a uniform that had a visual signature, and what it did was I took the vertical stripes of the socks and I worked it as the inner collar pattern, just to just very subtle, like it was the inner collar pattern, like it's just like a tribute in orange and blue, not in brown and yellow, but in orange and blue, just to remember the past. So the Ron Dane Cowboys game. Oh, you right there. You scratched me right where I itch. Ron Dane. I liked him. I actually remember running. There was one time I ran into him in a liquor store once, like literally. I just was getting some provisions for a day for going to a barbecue or something like that, and I just bumped in. Hey, Ron, what's up? He's a good guy. Good guy. Just glad we're not doing the AFL brown jerseys anymore. Brown jerseys don't mix. Yeah. Someone asked me, will we ever see them again? I said, yeah, I think my guess is we'll see them for the 75th anniversary. So that's my prediction is we'll see them in the 75th season. So my guess is we'll see them in 2034. And yes, the 05 Broncos. I can still see Ron Dane galloping down the field at Texas Stadium on Thanksgiving Day to set up a Jason Elam field goal on a Broncos win. And you know what? That seems to be a really nice place on which to end this show and go to bed. Ron Dane memories. The Great Dane with a great day in Broncos history 20 years ago. Number 33 in your program. Still one of those guys who's number one in my heart. Ron Dane, former Heisman Trophy winner with a big day on Thanksgiving Day for a great Broncos season. It would have been cool because I liked him in college. I liked him here. Would have been cool to see Ron Dane get a Super Bowl ring. Would have been cool to see that whole team get a Super Bowl ring, but alas. And I still see him eating his turkey. And Ron Dane was a guy who, when he was here, he's a guy who enjoyed his meals and he enjoyed that turkey. he savored it. We all savored that win. That was a fun trip. Fun trip and a fun flight back to Denver and a fun season. I think that was one of my favorite teams. I'd say my favorite teams, the 2015 Broncos won all one of my favorites. 05 Broncos. I loved, when I was in Carolina, I loved the 08 Panthers. That was a team that had great chemistry. Kind of like the 05 Broncos. Two teams that had great chemistry and then two teams that just laid a complete egg at home in the playoffs. Mercy me. Two quarterbacks named Jake who went out and had two terrible days in the postseason. Although Jake Delhomme, his day was worse in the 09 postseason for the Panthers. Man alive, that's still probably the worst game I've ever seen a quarterback have in the playoffs. against the Cardinals and Kurt Warner. Ugh. Anyway, appreciate y'all joining me, and when we get you again late solo, you'll get me again tomorrow night after the joint practice, and we'll talk about what we learned. Probably learned quite a bit, kind of like we learned a lot last week against the 49ers. I expect we'll learn quite a bit when the Broncos take on the Arizona Cardinals, the last official training camp practice, but the second joint practice. First time Sean Payton's had two different teams in for joint practice over the course of his career, so check all that out. We're going to have plenty to disseminate and a good chance to compare and contrast the Broncos from one week to the next. So appreciate y'all joining me. Appreciate all the kind words in the conversation as always. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Tell your friends if you like this, if you think they like this channel and like this type of show. A little more laid back, a little more free-flowing, of course, than a lot of other Broncos shows out here. And join me and Cecil Lammy, 5 p.m. Mountain Time on Thursday. We'll talk all about the Broncos joint practice. I will have a wrap about late afternoon Thursday, about 5 or 6 minutes, talking about what we saw at the practice. And then, of course, I'll be back here late Thursday night, early Friday morning to break it all down for you on Denver Football After Dark. And then, of course, more Orange and Blue today on Friday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. And we'll preview the Cardinals preseason game Friday night as well. That'll come sometime after I get back from Coors Field that night, covering Rockies Diamondbacks as well, because I'm a busy, busy guy doing all sorts of things, including getting on out to Coors Field and watching your Colorado Rockies, who took 2 out of 3 from the St. Louis Cardinals this week. The other Cardinals, talking all about all sorts of Cardinals. How about that? Anyway, appreciate you joining me here on Denver Football After Dark on this Wednesday night into Thursday morning. It's always great chatting Broncos with y'all here on this show and catching up with y'all. So appreciate you guys. Appreciate you taking time to join me, whether it was live or on a time shift in the morning and the afternoon. Hope you have a great day wherever you are in the world. And where Broncos country is worldwide, I know, and I know people check this out from all over the globe. So wherever you are, whenever you watch, appreciate you joining me here on Denver Football After Dark, even if it's light outside, where you are, and I will talk to you again next time. Take care. Thanks for watching.